Good morning, everybody. My name is Laura Stewart, and I'm the Vice President of Community Development at the Forsyth County Chamber of Commerce. It's so great to see all of you guys. How many of you have attended a Healthcare Association Practice Managers Roundtable here in this space before? Raise your hand for me. Okay, all right. So I hope that everyone had a wonderful holiday week. We were a little concerned about our timing, scheduling, but now I just know we need to book stuff on the holidays with you guys. So thank you all so much for coming out. In my role at the Chamber, I get to be the staff liaison to our Chamber's Healthcare Association, and part of that work is to provide informational sessions for our healthcare practices, because we know that you guys are businesses just like the bulk of our chamber membership. So trying to provide these roundtables, trying to ensure that they are timely topics for you, but also a space where you can connect with one another and share best practices. So thank you so much for being here today. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We do have our virtual audience joining us, and they are a crowd that is the same size, if not larger, than all of you here at Northside's space with me. So hello to our virtual audience. Thanks for joining in via Zoom. Because they are with us, we do want them to be able to hear us, hence the insurance that we were able to get this mic working. So when we are at our Q&A portion, or if you have some feedback for our speaker, we will have another mic that we can bring to you in the audience. Please be sure to use that here so that our virtual audience members can hear you. And for our virtual members, if you will, put your questions into the chat on Zoom. My colleague Jesse Martin, who's in the back of the room, is monitoring that and can get those questions to me so that we can get them to our speaker. I do want to take just a quick minute to thank Northside for allowing us the space to have everybody join in person. It really makes a difference rather than just strictly a Zoom call. So we're so grateful to them. But we're also grateful to our sponsors who make this series possible. So our Healthcare Practice Managers Roundtable series is made possible by our presenting sponsor, Brandywine Printing. Many of you have probably met Derek Brooks. He was here earlier and had to leave. He did leave a gift for many folks. And I did just want to mention the reason that Derek wasn't able to stay with us all day today is because it's a busy day at the Chamber of Commerce. This morning, our Workforce Collaborative is meeting as well, and they are a group that is intentionally meeting monthly to talk about the workforce challenges in our community and to seek solutions. So just know that whether Derek is here with us or in that space, being a part of those roundtable discussions, that he's an advocate, not just for the industry, but also for you guys meeting at staff. He's also available for resources, so just wanted to make mention, you may see some of his signage up here along the wall. Derek brought these to showcase this product. He does do this for healthcare clients, and these items, I know you guys, especially my Northside folks, you're probably thinking, oh, Lynn's not here today, so she stuck stuff on the walls. We did stick stuff on the walls, but not particularly because Lynn's not with us. It's because these do not harm the walls. So these posters are static cling. It is a product that is difficult to source in the U.S., and Derek is able, Brandywine Printing is able to provide these. So if it's something that your practice needs, a message that you can easily swap out for your patients, thank you, Jesse, for demonstrating these. Derek did just want me to make mention of that. In addition to Brandywine Printing, we have several sponsors making today possible. Our Healthcare Hero sponsors are Apple Spice Catering and Central EMS. And our care sponsors are Dental Partners of North Georgia with Dr. Ben Miller, who's here. Please raise your hand, Dr. Miller. Thanks for joining us. Hallmark Healthcare with Andy Roberts. Andy, if you'll say hello. And Assisted Living Locators with Greg Santini. Greg, I think, is back there. If you'll stand and raise your hand. Thank you, Greg. Will you guys please help me join them in thanking them for making these events possible? Well, let's get to the bulk of our content, you guys. Today's discussion is going to be led and facilitated by Sergeant Terry Hawkins. Sergeant Hawkins serves as the Crisis Intervention Response Team Lead for the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office. And we know that a large portion of what your teams are dealing with are your patients and those patient interactions. We know that it is something that you want to be able to provide resources to them, and I think our turnout today showcases just the level of importance of this topic. So So please join me in welcoming Sergeant Hawkins for our session today.
All right, thank you. So my name is Terry Hawkins. I'm with Forsyth County Sheriff's Office. Like she said, I've been with the agency now for 24 years. When we talk about this morning's topic of de-escalation and conflict, is there anybody really better than law enforcement to talk about de-escalation? It's pretty much our whole job, right? Within the practice setting, has anybody had to deal with irate customers or anybody that's created a problem? I know there's been a few because I've actually responded here to the campus multiple times. I spent a few years working narcotics for the agency. We had a couple of issues here on the campus, so we've had, I know here on this campus, plenty of times where there needed to be some de-escalation. So when we talk about why am I the person to speak this morning besides the profession itself, I've had some unique opportunities within law enforcement profession that exposes me to perhaps even a little more conflict and de-escalation exposure than normal police officer. And you can see some of my history there. Right now I am in what we call CERT, the Crisis Intervention Response Team. That role is almost exclusively dealing with our citizens that are experiencing mental health related crisis, substance use disorder crisis. So a lot of the mechanisms of dealing with someone in the community who's creating a problem, which tends to, if we can't de-escalate, rely on force. We try to avoid that and also avoid incarceration anytime possible. I'm also on our hostage negotiation team. When you talk high level crisis, that's about as bad as it gets. The need for de-escalation, the need for kind of talking things out, hopefully to avoid force whenever possible. And I can tell you, for me, this pretty much started when I was a very young deputy on the streets of Forsyth, patrolling at night back when there was only a few of us on duty at a time. So if you got into something that involved fighting somebody, typically our backup was a long time coming. They may have to come from the opposite end of the county. I realized that one night when I pulled somebody over on 400, probably 2 or 3 in the morning back then, hardly anybody on the road, and this gentleman was flying very, very fast. So I decided to pull him over, and we'll talk about his speed for a second. When I got up to the window, he had some very negative things to say about our encounter. Lots of things about me personally. It was one of those nights, normally that stuff rolls off my back. For whatever reason that night, I don't remember why, but some of those words actually got me a little bit and got me kind of riled up. So when I go back to the car to run his information, comes back, his license is suspended. And back then that meant you're going to jail. We can't release you on a citation on a suspended license. So I won't lie, there was a part of me that really enjoyed the fact, after all those negative things he said, he's going to go to jail today. So as soon as it popped on my computer, suspended license, he's going to jail. I jumped out of the car, went up to his car, no mind toward de-escalation or anything. I was all about the conflict. Threw open his door and said, your license is suspended. You're going to jail. Get out of the car. And I was ready for conflict. However, if I had taken another 2 seconds to read the report that comes back when you run your license, I would have noticed things like height and weight. I didn't think about that until he stood up and kept standing up and kept standing up and kept standing up. So it turns out he was about 6'5", 350, 375. And within about a split second, I thought there's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
About to have a conflict that I'm not ready for. So was able to, it turns out he's a really nice guy. We talked on the side of the road. He understood things happen. We have jobs to do. No problem at all. Once I started smiling a little bit and reset myself, and we talked it out, no problems with him. So hopefully, if you have conflict in your offices, if you'll start with yourself, you can have similar outcomes. When we talk about the law enforcement perspective of de-escalation, why do we have to do it so much? Just some things to think about. Conflict resolution for us is mostly mediation. When I say conflict resolution, It is usually we are responding to a call for service in the community where a citizen has called reporting some type of conflict in their home, in the community, in their business. More times than not, our role is simply mediation because that generally works. Sometimes having that emotionally uninvolved party on scene that allows everyone a chance to make themselves heard is generally enough to kind of calm emotions so that we can have a conversation, and that usually works. So it's usually mediation. Not everybody that we tell is under arrest is willing to go peacefully. There are a lot of people that are not emotionally prepared for an arrest. So we have a lot of conflict or a lot of de-escalation when it's time to actually arrest someone. And then certainly we have critical incidents that happen every day around the country that involve having to use our skill sets for crisis negotiations, hostage, suicide negotiations. Does anybody know how many suicides we're having in the community? And when I say suicides for law enforcement, the actual completed suicides, suicide threats, or suicide attempts. Here in this community, this county, I think we're approaching 300,000 people. We're averaging a little more than one a day of suicide calls. Very difficult calls, obviously heightened emotions. So dealing with someone who's in a suicidal crisis involves a lot of verbal skills. However, just because it happens in law enforcement, they are useful for the non-law enforcement arena as well. The concepts that we'll talk about today are the same. They're not law enforcement specific. We just apply them in a law enforcement problem. So the first thing we start with is what actually is the problem. Sometimes it is us. We can definitely bring our own view about the conflict or the interpersonal interactions, and we can create conflict ourselves. Sometimes it is not us, especially within your communities, great frustrations over unmet expectations. There could be a misunderstanding on billing, a misunderstanding on service provided, and there's emotional reaction to that misunderstanding. It is typically, especially in negotiations, often we will say, the problem is not the problem is their reaction to the problem. So when they bring an emotional reaction, that can greatly magnify whatever the issue is. Sometimes it can be very simple. Sometimes it's a misunderstanding where we just need to clarify language for them to realize that it's not a very big deal. But when they bring emotions to that, then that kind of gets in the way of rational conversation. So we know that the parts of the brain that help us conduct rational conversation and understanding is not the part of the brain that's operating when you're in a heightened emotional state. And certainly, we see this a lot in my role. Often we are not the problem. We're going to be the target. So they're going to take it out on us simply because of what we represent in that moment. I would have to imagine your roles, it's probably the same. You probably yourselves have not created the problem, but because you're the one standing there talking to them, you're going to be the target of their emotional state. So for us, it is easier and more successful if we start when we're entering into some sort of conflict situation where we're going to need to de-escalate heightened emotions as we found them. We do like to start with ourselves. We are humans ourselves, so whatever the day has been up to that point, there may be some problems that we're dealing with. So it could be that we need to check ourselves first before we enter into this interaction. So one thing I like to remind myself right off the bat is that the person I'm dealing with is a human being. So just like me, there was a part of their day prior to this event. I don't know what happened before our interactions, but I can assume it wasn't a very good day for them. So it's a human being subject to emotions, bad days, and all of that. I try to seek an empathetic stance for myself, try to understand where are they coming from, how are they viewing the problem they're expressing. How do they see this situation from their perspective? Because if I can see it the way they see it, then perhaps we can find a way through this. If I can do that, if you can do that, that sets the stage for communication a lot better than kind of running to your corner, so to speak, and being defensive to where you're both trying to defend yourselves during some type of interaction, which is largely unhelpful. Another thing to think about is when you think of how will we define success for this conflict, what does that mean? What's the best outcome you can achieve? I know that not every complaint you're going to get from a client is going to be something you can address. Possibly the accusations are coming at you personally for what you're trying to accomplish. So I know we tend to fall into the trap, or maybe it's just me. Sometimes my initial response is to defend myself and prove through some conversation that no, between the two of us, I'm the one that's right here. I'm right, you're wrong, and trying to defend that position. That may be important in some cases, but when we think about how to have a conversation that is calmer in nature, sometimes that may work against us. So make sure you understand what is it you're trying to accomplish. How do you define success? And hopefully you have a customer service mindset that can be very helpful with that as well. Has anybody tried this technique? Does anybody have any stories where this has actually worked? I can tell you I've been married for a long time. I've got 3 kids through teenage years. I've got a teenager for just a few more weeks. I've tried this a few times. It has never worked for me. If you go on YouTube and you can look at body cams for police officers having conflicts, you will see this phrase quite often. And we teach it at the agency to avoid the phrase because it just doesn't work. But we still hear it on body cam because it feels natural. When someone's heightened emotion and it's time to deal with them, it is a natural response. Hey, I need you to calm down. It feels natural. It never lands that way. Nobody ever, in my experience, has never said, hey, that's a great point. That's a great point. I didn't know that I was getting away. I will calm down on this talk. So really for us, we try to avoid it because it always comes across as judgmental. It always comes across as dismissive of their side of the story. So in the interest of rapport, and we generally treat rapport as king. If we can establish rapport with each other, then probably we're going to have a calmer conversation where we can address concerns both directions. So something like calm down, or as my grandfather used to say, hey, you need to take a log out of the fire and cool off a little bit. Things like that generally do not help. So when we talk about controlling yourself first, here's for me, one of the first things I will do is, as I'm talking, I will think about how am I communicating in a technical sense. And I will generally start with my voice. I will check my volume to make sure I'm not yelling at someone, my cadence. When we get excited, we tend to talk more rapid. And then my tone. And when I say tone, I don't mean like an accusatory manner of speaking. I mean more of an easygoing, calm, rational presentation verbally to talk with someone. I have used this in very heightened crisis states involving people that are threatening to harm other people, where everybody on scene has heightened emotions. I have used this very successfully. One thing I have noticed, anytime I'm talking with someone and they're in that supreme heightened emotional state where it's the yelling and the rapid speech, and I come in and I'm asking them, tell me what's going on today. And it's low and slow. It is nearly impossible for someone to keep that same high energy and talk to me when this is the way I'm interjecting into the conversation. Usually it looks like one of two things. Either they will get so frustrated that they will dismiss me and it'll go in a different direction, or more commonly, they will themselves begin to mirror my presentation. They'll begin to slow down. We can sometimes even see the body language shift as they realize Terry's not going up with me. I've got to come down so that I can talk with Terry. So controlling the voice is an easy first step if you can do it. And then body language, I like to make sure my body language matches the words that I'm saying. If I'm telling someone, hey, I'm here to help, and we'll have a conversation, but I'm belated and I have my hands up, then that body language isn't really saying, I'm here to help, I want to listen to your concerns. What it's saying is I'm defensive and I may go offensive physically, and people will catch that. Even if they don't understand what body language means, everybody knows kind of what a fighting stance looks like. Everybody knows sometimes they encounter someone that makes the hair stand up on the back of their neck a little bit, and they will react to that. So I try to have body language that matches. And then for me, the hardest one is facial expressions. It can be very hard to manage facial expressions because, let's be honest, every now and then you get a real zinger and the eyebrows shoot up. They're like, oh, okay. But obviously, people pick up on that unless you're on a phone call, and sometimes even on a phone call, you can still hear it, I'm sure. But the facial expressions, I work with clinicians, and we have plenty of calls where talking with my clinical partners, they'll tell me, man, the whole time we were dealing with that, I was just trying to tell myself, keep playing. Don't react to what they're saying. Watch my facial expressions. Or sometimes if we turn away, that's because we're trying to be mindful of some of the stuff we heard. One of the great things when we went through the COVID period was the masks. The masks were often very helpful. Sometimes I needed 2 masks so that I could just have a little slit. So as I'm dealing with someone, they wouldn't see my facial expressions. But manage your facial expressions. They also can contradict what you're saying. If you're telling someone, I want to work with you and let's figure this out, but every time they say something, you have the surprise, or if you're rolling your eyes, when they say, here's my problem, you roll your eyes, even if you're saying, okay, yeah, let's figure this out, your facial expressions are contradicting what you're saying. It's going to damage rapport, and again, ultimately we want rapport so that we can talk more closely as friends versus some type of conflict. The understanding from the point of view that can be a moving target, and it can change depending on the conversation. So if you're not understanding the problem that they see as they tell it, you may have to slow them down to get them to explain it from their perspective to help you see it. And what I have found a lot of times, if I'm not exactly understanding from their perspective, just asking the questions. So when you say this and really explore their perspective, not even really the problem at first, maybe exploring their perspective, it gives them a chance to kind of voice, here's why I've arrived at this heightened emotional state. Here's how I got here. If you can explore that a little bit, quite often I find that even that will kind of bring people down because it feels like you care about them, not just your practice or your business or whatever it is you're actually representing. You've actually brought them into your circle of concern, and that can be very reassuring to that person. It can go a long ways toward de-escalating the conflict if they feel like they're at least being heard. Even if they're not being understood, if they're at least being heard and you're trying, that can be very helpful. So when we talk about active listening skills, if you ever have a chance to attend some training on ASL, it can be very beneficial. I tell all of our deputies to go look for that training because it's very helpful for us. And when I say active listening skills, that doesn't just mean close your mouth and listen, although that can be a part of it. Active listening skills is a set of technical skills that we employ during conversations to help further the conversation, increase understanding, de-escalate heightened emotions as we find them. And I've got some examples we'll talk about. The first is open-ended questions. When we say open-ended questions, generally we mean a question that cannot be answered or should not be answered with a simple yes or no. So an open-ended question could be, normally one that I will start with when I get called to a scene is, hey, my name's Terry, what's going on today? Now, every now and then, when I do that, someone will say no. And that's an inappropriate answer. But when they do that, that tells me some stuff. Okay, they're probably reacting because this is my uniform. I dress this way on purpose. It is to start building rapport with the people we respond to so that I don't have badges and guns in someone's face when I'm trying to talk to them. However, many of our mental health folks know that they're used to dealing with uniformed police. The person in civilian clothes is different. And so when they tell me no, generally that means they're worried about maybe going to the hospital, or I'm a detective and they're going to go to prison, something like that. But generally, an open-ended question, you're going to get some useful information like, how can I help you today? What's going on today? Open-ended questions tend to inspire more conversation. Minimal encouragers is a term for the little things we do when we are actively engaged listening to someone. So something like a nod of the head or the phrase, That's what we call a minimal encourager. Minimal encouragers are hard to fake. So if someone's telling you about a problem while you're trying to do an email or trying to do an administrative task at your desk or something like that, you're probably not giving the minimal encouragers, and they will pick up on that. So the minimal encouragers is one way of showing them, I am listening to you, I'm paying attention, I'm invested in this conversation. So we use those. Emotional labeling is a great tool because this is another tool that lets them know you're engaged in the conversation and you see that this is important to them. You are labeling the emotion that they see. And it can be something as simple as, I can see that this is very upsetting for you. That lets them know that the emotions they're feeling, you're picking up on that. And it's just a way of conveying the fact that you're upset underlines the importance of this conversation to me. We'll work through this together. Emotional labeling, I have found quite often, is a very powerful tool for de-escalating. If someone's very upset over something, and you can tell them, hey, I can see this really making you upset. Let me see what I can do to help. That's a very powerful tool. Paraphrasing, also, again, all these are related to showing the person that you're invested in this conversation. Paraphrasing is saying back to them your understanding of what they're saying to you. So it could be as simple as, so what I hear you saying is that you don't want to make this copay payment today for whatever reason or whatever they're giving you back. And it does a couple of things. Number one, it tells them, again, you're paying attention. And it also allows you to kind of zone in on what is the real issue. Even if it's something they've said, it could be that they didn't have as much weight on it as you heard. So when you're saying back to them, okay, so as I understand it, you're telling me this or that. If you're a little off target, this is their time to tell you. And this generally isn't negative in my experience. I generally don't have people say negative things. That is not it at all, and then they're back up. Sometimes I'll get some corrections. Well, yeah, I did say that, but what I'm really meaning is, and then they can bring it back around. And if you're trying to resolve conflict, that's helpful for you, because if you were a little off target, you misheard, or they said something they didn't really mean in that way, this is a good way to kind of bring it back in, bring it back around so you understand what it is you're even trying to fix, or if it's something that you can fix. The I messages, we use this to confront behavior. So if someone is at your desk screaming at you, and that's distracting, or it's scary, and if it's frightening to you, that is distracting. It's hard to solve someone's problems when you're worried about, are they about to come over the desk and attack me because they're yelling? So an iMessage can be something as easy as, all right, this is really important for me. I want to try to find out how to fix this problem. But when you're yelling at me, I can't focus on trying to find a way through this. Or when you're doing fill in the blank, you can fill in the blank. So it's a way of letting them know that if they're in a place where they should probably change whatever it is that's distracting you from attending to their problem. So generally, this works pretty good. Even if they can't change behavior, you'll get some feedback about what your message meant to them that you may use to shape your conversation further. If we can find rapport, I have found that I'm most of the way home. Now, for me, my partners will sometimes laugh at me because when we walk into a home, I'm scanning a lot of things. Now, for sure, I'm scanning people because I want to know if are there any threats that I need to worry about. But more so, I'm looking at what does the environment look like, because as I have conversations, I may need something from the environment to use for rapport. And this will be a little harder for you, I would imagine, because you're not going to have those same tools to work with. But if I'm talking with someone and all I'm getting back is emotion and negativity, but when I walked into the house, they had a huge fish on the wall, mounted with a plaque or whatever. If I can work it into the conversation, I'll do it. Hey, did you catch that fish? And we'll just have a random parallel thing. And I have people bite on those kind of things very, very often. And I've had a lot of people where you can see it is headed toward extreme violence. And then, matter of fact, the picture with me with my hands up talking to that guy, that was one such case. He came out of the house, and as soon as he started talking, I could tell, oh, we're going to fight today. As he was very heightened emotion, talking about things that were going wrong for him, he made mention of his job, and all I said is, what do you do for work? And we ended up where that picture, where it was very disruptive. He stopped for a second and very calmly, and we laughed about it. He even put his hand up on the door frame and said, oh, I'm an accountant. And we talked about that for a little bit, and after a couple of minutes, you could see he kind of realized, wait, I'm supposed to be really bad right now. And we had to go through it again. But in that moment, just a simple rapport thing, I'll be honest, I know very little about accounting. But I can talk about it. I can ask questions. Oh, that's really interesting. Was there a lot of schooling for that? So seeking rapport items, it could be as simple within a practice setting, and I don't work in your environment, so I'm just guessing, as, let me pull up your record. If there's something maybe with the wearing, hey, I love your shirt. I had just yesterday, one of my partners, oh, I love your shirt. It's as simple as that. We'll talk about the shirt a little bit. As we're working through other things, if there's a rapport item that they bite on, then it may work to your benefit. It's hard to continue heightened emotions where you're angry at someone who you actually have something in common with that you're almost friendly with. So think about that. If you can bring it down to just two people talking, you're probably done. The conflict itself, at least in a scary or progressive escalation, is probably done at that point. If you get it down to the point where it's just two people exploring a problem, you're probably going to be okay. Often I will see the body language change when I know that I'm starting to make progress, because the body language that looks aggressive with the hands up, and we'll talk a little bit here in just a second what the facial features look like when someone is angry and aggressive. A lot of times I'll see the shoulders slump down. I'll see the posture kind of relax. I'll see smiles come out sometimes. Even in hostage situations that we've had here in the county, once we get rapport, you can hear the language change a little bit, and maybe if you edge in a little bit of a joke or a little something humorous, a little comment, you may get a smile or a chuckle over that. We're making progress. So good things. Gratitude, big fan of gratitude. I like to thank people. Sometimes it may feel weird if they're still kind of up there a little bit. But ask them, hey, let's step over here and talk about your problem. If they step over there, it could be as simple as, hey, I appreciate you coming over here and talking to me. Tell me more about your problem today. Let's see if I can find a way to help with that. Can gain a lot of ground for that. So if we talk about, is there a formula to success? Generally what we see, if we can engage a conversation with a sense of empathy, trying to understand from their perspective, we get a lot of information from them about why is this important to them, why are they viewing this as a conflict. If we put that with rapport, generally we will see a change in behavior. We have influence to change their behavior. So the behavior that we're generally talking about would be the behavior that's alarming in your facilities, how they're acting, maybe their tone. So empathy, information rapport, probably that's going to change. Doesn't mean we've solved anything as far as their actual problem, but it could be that at least we can have better conversations about it. If you do get someone de-escalated, don't send them out the door having not fixed anything, or at least the understanding that this is something I cannot fix, because that's legit, right? And you can't fix every problem that they're going to bring in, because a lot of times they are misunderstanding, and you can't always fix that. So it could be that the best you can do is to leave on calm terms with them maybe understanding the next steps for them. So I can't fix this, however, here is someone who may be able to fix it, or here's the next steps to begin to explore the problem. Maybe that's the best you can do. However, it doesn't always work. I'm pretty good at this, but I'll tell you, I still fight sometimes. Granted, I'm law enforcement. You're not supposed to be fighting. I am older law enforcement, so I have noticed that it takes me much longer to recover now. If I do have to do a little bit of wrestling at work. But I feel like I'm pretty good at this, but it doesn't always work. And there's a lot of reasons for that. If you do all this correctly and it doesn't work, that doesn't mean that you did something wrong. It just meant you're with someone who just wasn't hearing it today. And that's possible. That happens. They got themselves to an emotional state for whatever reason. They brought a lot of things to your offices that day in their personal life and other things going on. It could be that nobody is talented enough to have avoided some type of higher conflict that day. So just know that it's not always going to work. With that in mind, it's time, if you haven't thought along these lines, it's time to think about, well, what happens if it doesn't work? What's my plan if I've done everything right? I took notes from what Terry said, and I've been checking the boxes, and this person's still really mad, and I'm starting to get a little worried. What next? It's a good time to start thinking about that when you're not in conflict. Is there a way for you to signal for some type of assistance within your practice? If there's a protocol, make sure you know what the protocol is. If there's nothing, it's a good time to think about what would be best suited for our setting. When we talk about pre-assault indicators, I don't mean this to be frightening, but there are people that when they get very upset, they may want to add a physical aspect to their emotional state. So some things that we look for in our role to let us know that this person may be entertaining thoughts of actual physical violence to go along with that. The first thing is the threats themselves. If they tell us, I'm about to put my hands on you, or I'm going to hit you, or however they want to explain it, we believe them. Sure. If you tell me you're going to attack me, then I believe you. I'm going to respond to what you've said, and I think you should too. If they tell you they're going to attack you, you should give that some weight. The clenching, even if they haven't said it, the body as it prepares for physical assault, or prepares for possible physical assault. You may see the preparation with the clenching. I watch the hands a lot, not just because I worry about them going for a weapon, but also use them as a way of reading what are they thinking right now. And if I'm talking with someone and it doesn't feel like it's going okay, and I see the fists start to clench a little bit, I'm going to react to that. I'm going to believe that even if they haven't said it, they may not even completely realize it in the conscious sense. It could be subconscious that their body's preparing, and I'm not comfortable with that, so I'll get ready for that. The fighting stance with kind of that posturing, or if the hands come up, certainly if the hands come up and the fists are clenched, whatever you're signaling for assistance is, this is a good time for that. That person is definitely getting ready, or is open to the idea of physical violence. And with the bladed stance, if you're familiar with kind of the boxing stance, that's what we're talking about. Their strong side foot will go back a little bit, the hands will come up. Or coming into your personal space in an aggressive way. So kind of that charging at you. If you have counters in your practice or desks that visually everybody knows, here's the line, and suddenly they're going beyond that, something to think about. It could be a pre-assault indicator. And I would say if they're doing none of this, but you still have that feeling, then you should listen to that too. Don't think, hey, I'm really scared right now, but Terry talked about clenching, and I'm not seeing any of that, so maybe I'm wrong. I'm not saying that. If you feel threatened, then give that some weight. So if you're going to call for assistance, think about, does your facility have a protocol? If a protocol is in place, they would probably prefer you use that protocol. There's good reasons for that, so make sure you know what it is. If you have employees, make sure they know what that protocol is. Make sure they know who they're calling, how are they calling, is there a particular number to security or a supervisor, and then make sure they understand when to activate the various protocols that you've established for your facilities. Supervisor versus organic security, if you have security, that's their job, or are they going to call 911? Great thing about supervisors is sometimes supervisors can actually change things, especially if they're emotionally uninvolved to that point. When they come in, it's fresh eyes. They haven't suffered the slings and arrows yet, so they're probably not upset, so they can hear the conflict objectively, and they may have some ideas to resolve that. If nothing else, maybe it just makes you feel more comfortable that there's another person there with you. And I think that's legit as well. If a supervisor or a coworker comes to you and you still can't resolve the conflict, then maybe that's someone that can step away and escalate who's coming to help. Again, maybe security, maybe 911. If you have a security team, they probably have some protocols that would be beneficial for you to know. Again, it could be how you alert them. There could be policies that dictate who's doing what when you've taken it to that level. They may want you to back off. They may want you to go to a particular office. Just make sure you understand what those are. So 911, I get a lot of questions. Well, how do I know when it's time? Do I call 911? Do I call the non-emergency line? And I tell you, if we had more time, I would put up a bunch of the screens when we get these 911 calls so you could see the things people call 911 about. And I promise you, if you feel like you need the police, just call 911. Some of the reasons people call are amazing to me. It blew my mind when I got into the profession. If you feel like you need the police, you call 911. You're not going to be wrong. Even if all we do is we get there and we allow a safe space for people to have their voices heard, and then they go their separate way, we're happy with that. It doesn't bother us one bit. We get paid the whole time we're there. So call 911. You're going to get a lot of questions if you call 911. Dispatchers or the call takers are going to ask a lot of questions because we want a lot of information. Here's some examples. Where are you at? Number one, hey, what's the location of your emergency today? They're going to know, who are you by name? What's your purpose there? Who are you to your location? What's your name? They may even ask your date of birth. Obviously, they're going to want to know what's happening If you're calling about a person, hey, this person is yelling and screaming, they're going to want to know, what does that person look like? What are they wearing? And that's in case if that person leaves, when you say, hey, you better leave, I called the cops. Well, a lot of times they're going to leave. Just because they leave doesn't mean we don't want to still talk to them. So we'd like to know what they're wearing. All those questions can be very frustrating. And we hear that a lot. Would you just send help? So when you're answering those questions, help is already on the way. Generally, once they know where you're at and what's going on, that already shows up in our system. So we're already en route. Now, all the follow-on questions that they ask in our system, they continue adding information. I just want to make sure you understand. If you call 911, as soon as they know where you're at, what's going on, we're coming. So don't get too frustrated with all those other questions. When we get there, it's probably going to be more than one of us. The first thing we want to accomplish is scene safety. If we have concerns or there is physical violence, when we get there, we can see it happening, or we do the immediate read of body language and we can tell it looks like it's about to happen. That's going to be our first target. Before we get into patient records or here's what they're complaining about, first thing we're going to do is we're going to calm everybody down, make sure everybody's safe. Sometimes that means detaining people. So we may come in, if we do the body language read or physical assaults occurring, we're going to stop that and somebody's going in handcuffs. And then we will talk about what's going on. If you end up in handcuffs, we take handcuffs off just like we put them on. It's no big deal. We just want to make sure everybody's safe. If there's not been criminal activity, we're going to mediate, let everybody have their voices heard, and then put everybody on their way. We probably will separate. We won't have you in front of a person and say, well, what'd they say to you? And then this, and then that. We're going to separate so we get both sides of the story because that helps us kind of mediate. The exploration of criminal activity, again, we also will have many questions so we understand, has a crime occurred? We want to make sure you have your voice heard. Also about what do you want to happen here today? Because it could be, hey, I just want this person to calm down so we can talk about what their problem was. We can help with that. Sometimes they've gone too far. I want this person to leave and not come back. You have that right as well. The practice owner or an authorized representative, according to law, has the right to exclude someone from private property. So if you're a manager or an owner or an authorized representative, you can tell us, I want this person to leave and never come back. We can do it. It's called a criminal trespass warning. We do them all the time. If that person comes back later, they're subject to arrest. So you have that right as well. If we get there and we find criminal activity has happened, then probably there'll be an arrest made. We'll talk with you. We believe victims have rights. So if something like that has happened, we'll talk to you. And if you're desiring prosecution, probably an arrest will be made. And so that's how we kind of operate and how we look at conflict, how conceptually we enter into these conversations, and hopefully if you do the same thing, it's successful for you as well. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Sergeant Hawkins. Just again, a quick check. Any questions for Sergeant Hawkins? Jesse, any questions coming through from our Zoom audience? All right. Well, I hope that that was valuable to you guys. The next time we get together, we'll have a little lighter topic, a little lighter time, you guys. How about a party? How about some fun? Please, you have on your tables some frames as well as some flyers. We hope that you take those flyers back to your practices. Please be sure that you and your team are aware of our next upcoming event. This is something that may look different, but I think many of you have been a part of this event with us in the past. How many of you have attended the Healthcare Association Jazz in June event? Okay, I see some hands. So we do this annual event, a social networking, a couple of hours here on Northside's campus in the Women's Center Galleria. This year we're changing it up a little bit, adding a new little flair to the Jazz in June, and we're going to have neon night, you guys, which instead of jazz, we'll have an 80s themed jam, but still great food, great hors d'oeuvres, beer and wine, and some tunes happening there. So please mark your calendars. Be sure to join us. Like I said, take these flyers back to your practices so that folks are aware of that. And my colleague Jessie has a few extra in the back if you need a few to put up in your practices. So we hope to see you at Neon Night on June 12th. Also, just wanted you to save the date for our next roundtable, which will happen here in the Bennett Education Room on August 15th at 7:30, breakfast at 7:30, and the program at 8 a.m.